Poor Judd is dead, poor Judd Fry is dead. All gather round his coffin now and cry. He looks like he's asleep. It's a shame that he won't keep. But it's summer and we're running out of ice. Poor Judd.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Watching Watchmen. I'm your host, Joe.
And I'm Jimbob.
And together we're one drink in.
That was surprisingly good.
We did it.
Wow.
It only took us 3 episodes.
Not even planned.
So we're one drink in and we're also 1 episode in to the season.
Watching Watchmen. So, 1 episode in. Our first episode is called It's Summer and We're Almost Out of Ice.
Indeed. Everybody knows that that's from the musical Oklahoma, obviously.
It's my favorite musical.
I listen to it on repeat throughout the day, nonstop.
So yeah, it is kind of a long episode title, like a lot of for an episode of a TV show. It's it's a whole song lyric.
I'm trying to think. Titles in Lost. They were. I mean, we didn't even.
It was like The Glass Ballerina, or
The Moth.
The Constant. It was usually nouns.
Yeah. I've looked. I'm not going to spoil it, but I've looked ahead and I saw all the different episode titles. And some of them are obvious spoilers. There's...
Oh my.
Yeah.
Is it like Judd did it?
One of them is called The Big Blue Dong.
Ah, it's back.
The dong rings for thee.
Ooh boy. Jesus Christ.
Oh my. All right, maybe we should look at our notes. What do you think?
Notes are for suckers.
All right, so anyway, The Big Blue Dong.
So, it's summer and we're running out of ice. You mentioned a second ago that that's from Oklahoma, which is apparently also where the show is set, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Indeed.
So what is that song lyric about? Do you know? Like,
I do. I didn't, but I Googled it, and now I'm going to tell everybody.
You don't just know everything about the musical Oklahoma. You had to Google it.
You know, as much as I listened to it, you'd think I would have remembered that lyric, but it evaded me.
It's from a song called, spoiler alert, oh, by the way, spoiler alert for everything in this podcast, because we're talking about the show that if you're listening to this podcast, you should have seen already. So, if you haven't seen the show Watchmen on HBO, written by Damon Lindelof, turn us off right now and go watch it, or listen to us now and be confused, and that's fine too.
You know, also throughout this podcast, we might spoil Lost, so you should probably just watch all 6 seasons of Lost if you haven't already.
We'll
Familiarize yourself with it.
Spoil the original comic book Watchmen, because it's relevant, and it's 30 plus years old.
Just write us in the comments what you want us to spoil, and we will spoil it for you.
We'll spoil Oklahoma, the musical.
Do you know where Oklahoma takes place?
I believe it's in Kansas.
Okay. Should we do a breakdown of the episode, like the summary?
Sure. Yeah, so what I was saying before we jumped into our spoiler alert, so the title of the episode comes from a song from Oklahoma called Poor Judd is Dead. And so any musical theater nerds out there who see that in the title and then also realize that there's a character in Watchmen named Judd, you might just have sleuthed your way into a spoiler about the ending of the episode, because Judd dies.
Spoiler alert. Did we say spoiler alert? Spoiler alert.
I mentioned it.
Judd dies at the end of the episode. Hopefully you guys have watched Watchmen, and that's why you're listening to the podcast Watching Watchmen. Welcome to the show. So yeah, the name of the episode is a reference to the song in Oklahoma called
Poor Judd is Dead.
Poor Judd is Dead.
And it's spelled D-A-I-D, Dade. It's like phonetically with the accent. Like all the lyrics in that
Did I
song.
say it right? Dead?
Dead. Poor Judd is dead. I don't know how it goes. It's something. I listened to it earlier.
I'll have to share this somehow. I have a running playlist of all the songs that have been featured in either an episode of the show or in teasers leading up to the show. And, I'm going to share it. I'll figure out how to do it. Stay tuned.
So who does the music for the show? It's
Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of Nine Inch Nails.
9 Inch Nails. They sound hardcore.
They are. That is, with all the religious symbolism that Damon Lindelof enjoys, 9 Inch Nails, you may remember.
My toenails are about 9 inches.
You should probably get that checked out. I don't think that's healthy.
They're kind of yellow.
Yeah, definitely get that checked out. And you know what, listeners at home, check your toenails as well. And if they're 9 inches long, you should probably do something about it.
Keep your toenails under 9 inches. You don't want 9 inch nails.
You need some 9-inch toenail clippers to take care of those.
So anyway, on to the show. The beginning of the show, of the episode, the first thing we see is a very uplifting scene from 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Tulsa race riots, or what is it, Black Wall Street?
Black Wall Street Massacre, I believe it's called. And we get to see it in pretty horrific detail. But let's back it up a little bit, because I thought you were serious for a second when you were talking about...
my toenails?
Yeah, the toenails. Let's talk about those for another... what did you say? You said it was a nice... I don't remember. But it did start out nice and wholesome for a minute, because you're watching that movie,
yeah.
And you got the young child watching the film, and clearly he's pretty familiar with it because he quotes the movie. Do you remember what that quote was?
There'll be no mob justice today. Trust in the law.
Trust in the law.
So the name of the film he's watching is Trust in the Law. It's, I believe, a fictional film.
But also starring a real-life human.
A historical figure, yeah. Bass Reeves, or Bass Reeves. I'm not sure exactly.
I think it's Bass Reeves, but
the Black Marshal of Oklahoma.
I don't know much about him beyond that, but he was based on a historical figure. Yeah.
So what one of my favorite things about that opening scene with the old timey silent movie is how it goes back to the Watchmen tradition of sort of flipping the hero, or the typical hero conventions on their head. So, in classic westerns, you have your white hat good guy and your black hat bad guy, and the good guy rides a white horse, and we see a white man clad all in white riding a white horse who's being chased by someone dressed in black whose face we can't see.
Man in black.
And he lassos him, pulls him off his horse, and eventually we find out that the man in white is the bad guy, a corrupt sheriff,
the corrupt law,
being taken down by the Black Marshal, the heroic Black Marshal. So it's it's kind of a simplistic but very, very clear indication that the typical tropes about heroes and law and order and justice and all that are going to be twisted a little bit, like flipped around. We don't necessarily are dealing with the traditional roles.
It's not always black and white. There's sometimes some gray muddled in there.
No,
would you agree?
Only black and white.
Just black and white.
Yep.
But sometimes we flip what black is.
Black and white is Rorschach's mask.
Indeed. So we've got the scene where he's watching the movie, and you hear the piano kind of start getting off tune, and then you realize that I guess you kind of knew if you lived in that time that they played piano. It's a live person playing piano to accompany the movie. So as we realize that there's destruction going, you start hearing sirens going on and explosions, and the piano music starts getting
gunshots.
A little. Mm-hmm. And you realize that this perfect little world of black and white is it's not so simple. The real world's a messy place, full of explosions and
we pull away from our heroic tale of cowboys to the very graphic destruction in Tulsa as Klansmen are riding through and flying planes and dropping bombs on the predominantly black population. And yeah, it's definitely an eye opener for sure. Can I mention, did you learn about the Black Black Wall Street in school, like in history or anything like that?
No, I didn't.
Where'd you first hear about it?
This show, which is, I learned most of my knowledge from TV shows.
Isn't that crazy though? So isn't that kind of a red flag? So I was watching a thing.
Something's amiss.
I was watching an interview with Damon Lindelof, and he mentioned that he also had not heard of it until fairly recently. And he was, naturally kind of embarrassed that he had no idea what this event even was. And so I'm thinking, what kind of, it feels like a red flag to me that we being, middle-class white people aren't even taught about this pretty significant event in relatively recent American history, I don't know.
No, I agree. It's almost as if we're being intentionally kept in the dark on this. It's kind of concerning. For such a horrific event, yeah, what 1921?
21, yeah.
That is not that long ago.
No.
If you were to live to be 105 years old,
you could
have been born and witnessed that horrific incident.
You could have been 7 years old watching that happen.
Watching Bass Reeves.
Watching Watchmen.
By the way, we are going to start a podcast called Watching Bass Reeves. That'll be the next podcast.
He's not up to much these days, but we're just watching to make sure.
So stay tuned. Anyway, back to watching Watchmen.
Did I mention we're one drink in?
So, just so you guys know, when we say that we're one drink in, we're not just pulling your leg. We legitimately have had a drink. What are we drinking today, Jimmy?
Today we are drinking Elysium Night Owl.
Did you say Night Owl?
I did.
Now that sounds
It's almost
familiar.
like that was intentional.
Huh.
Did you know there's a character in the Watchmen comic book named Night Owl?
You don't say.
I do. There's actually 2 of them.
Perhaps 3. We don't know yet.
Well.
But yes, Night Owl. So I thought that was appropriate. It's a delicious beer.
It's a pumpkin flavored beer.
Tastes like pumpkin pie.
By Elysian Brewing.
Really captures the essence of fall flavors.
If Elysian Brewing is looking to sponsor a podcast, we are accepting sponsors.
I wouldn't say no.
If you happen to be listening to this.
Back to the podcast. So we've got the destruction of Black Wall Street. It's pretty horrific. You've got airplanes flying by shooting people. You got people on the streets. The whites are wearing their white robes, and it's horrific.
So yeah, amid all the chaos and destruction, people are trying to evacuate naturally, as you would, and we see this family rush out of the movie theater, and they're trying to secure a ride out in an old timey car. The driver says there's no room, so the father of the little boy watching the movie says, "Well, just take the boy then." Like we just, in desperation, he packs him into a trunk, puts a piece of paper in his pocket, which says, "Watch over this child," just in a desperate bid to save the child's life, and sends him on his way.
Yeah, it seems like a father, a mother, and a child, and when they get there, the person who's got the car says, "No room, we can't fit them all," so they say, "Okay, just the boy," and they stuff him into a coffin-looking thing. Then they drive away. We don't have to go into the direct summary. We already kind of went over it.
This is true.
But so one of the interesting things is, you've got it almost seems like a parallel to a hero's origin story. You've got the destruction of the home. And
definitely.
These parents who
the loss of the parents.
The loss of the parents, and the last thing that the parents do is they send their son in a little pod and send them away with the hopes that someone's going to take good care of them.
Just like Kal-El.
Kal-El.
Just like sending him to Smallville, Kansas.
Kal-El is Superman, spoiler alert.
For those who don't know Superman's birth name.
So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think there is very likely intentional sort of parallel there. as their world is blowing up around them, the parents are trying desperately to send their last hope to safety. And what better origin story for somebody. Now, note though that like we don't actually know who this kid grows up to be. We see him later as a 105-year-old wheelchair-bound man in 2019, and that's about all we know about him.
Yeah, we don't actually get a name yet. All we know, the only reason we even know that the old man at the end is him is because that note, he's still carrying it with him on some enchanted magical piece of paper that never deteriorates.
Well, they don't make paper like they used to.
They sure don't. Anything else we want to talk about with the Black Wall Street Massacre? So there is one thing. There is a part during the massacre where the camera kind of focuses on one white man in particular holding a gun, and he looks an awful lot like the photograph in Judd's closet at the end. I'm gonna have to post a picture of this.
Yeah,
somewhere.
I hadn't seen that. I was trying to figure out who that picture was.
So yeah, the picture at the end with in Judd's closet, you see he's got a photograph of a young boy and an older police officer.
I think we presume that he's the young boy.
We would presume that he's the young boy. So one theory out there is that the older gentleman in the photograph is the person that they focus on at the massacre. So if you were to buy into this, that Judd's father or grandfather was one of the white supremacists that were attacking the blacks.
That's certainly possible.
It's entirely possible. We definitely know that the photograph is significant because the camera intentionally focused in on it for a decent amount of time. Mm-hmm. And they also focused on the guy at the opening sequence quite a bit. For
a second, yeah.
Yeah. So just throwing that out there.
There's a competing theory about that, about that photograph too, or at least I kind of have competing ideas about that.
Fair enough.
I tend to think there's a lot of parallels between Judd and Night Owl from the original comic book. The second Night Owl in particular. He has a copy in his office of the book Under the Hood, the autobiography written by Hollis Mason, the original Night Owl, and an owl-themed coffee mug on his desk. He's either a super fan or he's 34 years later Dan Dryberg living under a different identity.
It's possible. However,
you think there's anything to that theory, Joe?
There is. I mean, there's a lot to the theory that Judd is Night Owl. You could find plenty of evidence to support that. But if you were Night Owl and you didn't want people to know your identity, do you think you would drink out of a owl-shaped mug?
Well, the choice of coffee mug is hardly proof of another identity. Who maybe wants to maintain some connection to his past, you know?
In a very... I mean, if we noticed it, then certainly some of the police officers or detectives that work with him might put two and two together.
And so what if they do? He's the chief of police.
So, Judd, I noticed that you're a big fan of Night Owl. What's that all about?
Oh, yeah, he's a great guy. He's... in federal custody apparently right now, but I like
That's
him.
what I heard anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of obvious parallels. Also, there's a big one that we're overlooking is that he pilots Archie.
So Archie in the graphic novel, the Night Owl has he's kind of like Batman, right? He's got a lot of money, he's got a lot of gadgets, and he's got a big flying spaceship.
Something.
Spaceship.
Yeah.
I don't know if it goes into
airship,
space.
Yeah.
Some sort of a flying vehicle, and he calls it Archimedes, which is based on Merlin's owl, I believe.
Yeah. And before that, from the Greek inventor, thinker Archimedes as well.
Well, I only know Archimedes from the Disney animated movie Sword in the Stone. As I mentioned earlier, I learned most of my knowledge from movies and television. So anyway, back we were talking about the Black Wall Street Massacre. Was there anything else we wanted to discuss there? I
mean, I'm sure there's enough to discuss by smarter minds than ours about that incident.
We're taking that out.
I mean, seriously though, it's a pretty big deal, and I am, at least I for one, am hardly qualified to really dive into it too much. I wish I knew more about it, honestly.
Oh, yeah, I mean, as far as the historical event, yeah, I'm no authority on that. However, I did watch the episode, so I'm...
Yeah, it definitely does go towards establishing a lot of the themes that we see throughout the episode.
I think that's... the big theme of this show is racial tensions, right?
One of them, yeah. One
of the primary ones. The graphic novel focused a lot on nuclear war and the threat of Armageddon.
Cold War, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This time that they seem to be thinking that the greatest threat to humanity are racial relations. So we've got I think that's why Damon Lindelof decided to make the setting Tulsa, Oklahoma, because of that horrific event.
Tulsa's got a lot of history with regard to the Civil War as well.
And then picking up with the racial tensions, the 7th Cavalry, the terrorist organization that they discuss in the show. So Jimmy, what's the significance of the 7th Cavalry?
So apparently the 7th Cavalry, as far as I know, was a division of the U.S. Army under Lieutenant Colonel Custer. They participated in the Battle of Little Bighorn. Ooh,
Battle of Little Bighorn.
So Little Bighorn, we see a reference to that in the show when Chief Judd pages
Angela.
She gets Angela Abar. He sends her the message Little Bighorn. That's like her bat signal to go and do superhero stuff. Take out the dudes over in Nixonville.
Another thing to note about the 7th Cavalry is they spell it cavalry with a K instead of a C.
It's very subtle, guys.
That's their little white supremacist take on it. That's how they make it racist. You take a nice word like cavalry.
That's how you make things racist. You just change a letter. Has nothing to do with...
they do some other stuff too, but mostly because they swap out the letter K for C. Those bastards.
So we hear repeatedly throughout the show that the 7th Cavalry are a white supremacist group, but we mostly hear it straight from the police. Like, Looking Glass refers to them as a white supremacist organization. Sister Night says she can smell white supremacy. The dude smells like bleach, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But other than that, I don't know if we have a lot of direct evidence that they are truly white supremacists. I think there might be a bit of a misdirect going on here.
I mean, in their video, though, they've got that terrorist video where they speak some pretty awful things about blacks in particular.
Well, they use the word black. I think we might be being misdirected a little bit. And
not in a Damon Lindelof show. He would never misdirect us.
His stuff is always so straightforward. But no, I think not 100%, obviously. There's still a lot to be revealed as the episodes unfold. But I have a theory, like maybe my own headcanon theory, that maybe the 7th Cavalry isn't really as black and white, so to speak, as the police make them out to be. And if you think about, they're inspired by Rorschach, right? They read Rorschach's journal. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like their Bible, I guess you could say, which means that they know about Ozymandias' plot to blow up the world with a squid, and that it's all a cover-up, et cetera, et cetera. So what if they're motivated by that? What if when they talk about race traitors and whatnot in their big speech, what if that's kind of a misdirect? Like, they're not talking about ethnic races, but they're talking about the human race, because Ozymandias is kind of they might see him as a traitor to the human race for having killed so many people, supposedly to bring about peace and ending the Cold War. I don't know. What do you?
No, I like that, but they do pretty much explicitly say black filth.
Yeah, I mean, again, they might be trying to misdirect the police as well, from what we know. And when they say, a lot of filthy things tend to turn the color black.
It's possible. We don't know. We'll find out. I'll admit, we're one episode in, and I have not figured out the entire series as of yet.
Well, I'm looking to you for answers, Joe.
I know. There's a lot of pressure here. Let me give it some more thought. I'm going to sleep on it.
See, I don't know. That's just one possibility. They could very well be super racist. In any case, the symbolism used in the show is definitely meant to evoke modern white supremacy,
For sure.
or as we kind of see it in our modern world here.
So going back to the episode summary, the next is Black Wall Street Massacre. That happens. The big destruction. You see the little boy is pretty much the lone survivor after all of that. The car crashes.
Is he the lone survivor?
He's not the lone survivor, but all the adults are dead, and then you hear a crying baby in the field. So he picks up the little crying child, says it's going to be okay, and he starts walking away, and in the background you just see the whole city engulfed in flames. It's a beautiful shot. But
So while looking at things online for this, because as it may surprise you, we don't automatically know everything we're talking about, so we Google things every now and
I
then.
do. Jimmy doesn't.
There's a photograph from that event of a child holding a baby, like a really kind of poignant photograph that I feel the show tried to recreate here and use it as a very powerful image. We transition to a modern shot of either the same or a similar road as a pickup truck is driving and loudly listening to hip hop music. Do you know the artist and song that he was listening to?
I do, because I looked it up. I didn't know it before, but the song he's playing is Crushed Up by Future. And then he gets pulled over by
a cop.
By a cop. Pulls over.
Why does he get pulled over?
It's a great question. We don't really know. It looked like he was driving responsibly. It doesn't seem like he's going very fast. He seems like he's staying in his lane. So we don't really know. He gets pulled over. The officer doesn't say, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" He just says something about, "This is being recorded. Do you what does he say?
Do you consent?
Consent,
Yeah.
yes. Mm-hmm. What happens if you say no?
Probably nothing good. Knowing the way these police work, probably nothing good. They can't use their guns, but they
police are
do
the
have
good
beat
guys.
sticks.
We talked about that. License and registration. He's
Yeah.
got the Rorschach mask in his glove box, so that obviously raises some suspicion.
And the officer asks if he can look in the out of the truck at the lettuce he's supposedly hauling. To which our driver asks if he can.
Mind if I take a look at your face?
Right, and
he says,
the officer does not like that response. Right. So that's when we learned that police officers wear masks in the future after 1985 for their own protection. Later, we learned that there was what do they call it? The White Night, when police officers were attacked.
They do reference that. What was it? 3 years ago? It's been 3 years. We thought they were dead, but yeah. So 3 years ago, there was some sort of an event called the White Night where I assume the cavalry members went to the homes of all the police officers because they knew their names and identities and killed a lot of them. I know Angela was one of the victims who was shot.
Angela mentions getting shot in the abdomen when she is in a classroom teaching about mooncakes.
So it was interesting when the officer goes back to his car to request weapon access. Panda was obviously hesitant to give the go-ahead.
Yeah, he's got to go down this checklist, like, it was there likelihood of drugs and alcohol in the car? Do you feel like there's what's the likelihood of a threat to your life? The officer is obviously annoyed. He needs his weapon. He's saying it's a high probability. I need my gun. And we find out that he did need his gun because seconds after this interaction, when he finally gets to pull his gun out of the this bright yellow holster, our driver wearing a Rorschach mask unloads on him through the windshield with what looks like a submachine gun of some kind. So
I don't know who authorized the use of that weapon, but Panda certainly did not. It
wasn't Panda.
No.
So yeah, it kind of shows this. There's a double-edged sword to hyper regulation of these kinds of things. So like we want police officers to be able to do their jobs and do them safely, but we also need them to be accountable for things they do. I really like how Damon has a way of showing the various sides of conflicts that we kind of deal with in culture nowadays. Like the dialogue around police in our world is sort of reflected by this exaggerated version in the Watchmen world. And I think it kind of shows that it's a very multifaceted situation, in both worlds.
Yeah, it is extremely relevant to today's climate, and that's definitely intentional. I know, that we talked about the graphic novel being centered around the Cold War with nuclear holocaust. When you read that today, you really can't relate because you haven't necessarily been in the situation where any day someone could just push a button and the whole world explodes, right?
I mean, that's kind of happening today.
Kind of. I guess, well, Damon seems to think that the more prevalent threat to humanity is race relations, not nuclear holocaust. I think we've gotten to a point where...
the show can only explore so many issues, so... I think having the police wear masks, having the police have their firearms restricted, but have sort of other liberties that they don't have here. Like, they don't really need probable cause or warrants to pick people up and interrogate them. Because the chief orders the superheroes to go out and pick up our dudes at Nixonville and just interrogate them without any... they don't have any warrants for picking these people up.
Just Angela's great sense of smell.
She knows she can smell bleach.
She can smell bleach a mile away. So the officer gets shot up. Cavalry member throws a head of lettuce of some sort. What kind of lettuce was it?
Romaine, I believe.
Any croutons?
Not that I could ascertain.
And that's the end of that scene. Cut to Judd enjoying Oklahoma.
Black Oklahoma, as he calls it.
Blacklahoma.
All black Oklahoma cast.
He ends up getting interrupted in the middle of the show because another officer is telling him that the other officer got shot. So he exits and goes to the hospital.
Yeah, so we cut to the procedure, this really detailed scene in the hospital where Judd meets with Looking Glass after proceeding down a hallway just filled with masked cops. Like, the security is super high. And one thing Joe pointed out to me about the color in the hospital, you remember this?
A lot of blue.
Yeah, so...
The hospital's blue. There's some, blue... I don't know, it looked kind of like a printer, but they've just got a lot of blue themes going on there. So yeah, Damon's use of color throughout the show is really interesting to me. Obviously, in the comic book, color was really important. The whole thing is basically colored in secondary colors, and things like yellow and blue and red really pop out and are meant to signify certain things, and that's definitely true in the show as well. Yeah, we see a lot of yellow, that's for sure. All the cops' masks are yellow. The cops' sirens are yellow and red now. Traditionally you'd think blue and red, but...
Are they yellow and red or yellow and blue?
I think it's yellow and red.
Okay.
But yeah, yellow is extremely prevalent, which I don't really understand the significance of why the police love yellow outside of the fact that the graphic novel was yellow.
Yellow smiley face.
Smiley face. Are they aware? Is it do you think that they're fans of the comedian? Do you think it stems from...
I don't think it's the comedian. I think yellow is being the color of the smiley face. It's the color of innocence, and their badges are yellow. So it's in the show, it's more about the color of justice and righteousness and whatnot. And the splash of red on it is sort of showing how that's tainted by violence, I think. So, spoiler for the tail end of the episode, in a parallel to the comic when we see the comedian's smiley face badge get splashed with his blood, in this one we see Judd's his police chief badge get splashed with a drop of blood in a very cool visual parallel to the original.
It was extremely satisfying to watch the little blood splatter on that badge.
Well, keep your shirt on, Joe. I don't know how satisfying it was, but no, you're right. It was definitely an excellent image.
It was great. They talk about have you run background checks on all the personnel in the hospital because the nurses and administrative staff have seen the cop's face, so they take it extremely seriously if a cop's face is ever exposed. You see, Looking Glass has his mask kind of halfway up, and Judd almost kind of disciplines him and tells him to put his face down. Mm-hmm. Partially because he wanted to use his face as a mirror while he ties his tie.
Which, yeah, I really like that scene because, well, we meet Looking Glass for the first time and sort of get an idea of his role in the police. And we definitely also sort of get this idea that the police are using the superheroes sort of, or the masked people, as they're sort of lapdogs. Like before, superheroes operated outside the law. They kind of did their own thing. Now they're kind of like being pinned down under the law, being used as a tool to enforce their brand of justice when the actual rules and laws and regulations really stifle them from being able to do their job the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, I get the feeling that Looking Glass is kind of begrudgingly following orders. He almost seems like a dog, like you said. He's being controlled.
He's got his head down, yeah, when Judd's using his face, his which he refers to as mask, similar to Rorschach, to like adjust his tie and put his shirt on. And so, yeah, I think Looking Glass is super interesting, how the parallels between him and Rorschach and how they're sort of mirror opposites of each other is fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. So Chief talks to Looking Glass. Looking Glass tells him about the incident, says he believes it was romaine. Judd asks if there were any croutons. He says, not that I could ascertain.
Judd is not amused by Looking Glass's little analysis, I guess.
Looking Glass seems to have zero sense of humor.
I mean, he's
very matter of fact. It kind of reminds me of Rorschach.
He's kind of
way.
And he's also I get the feeling he's a little bit broken in a way. You know, Rorschach is this free spirit, vigilante who's definitely broken in other ways.
I think Rorschach is plenty
broken in other ways. Like he's like psychologically totally messed up.
Sure.
But Looking Glass is this sort of feels like humiliated, kind of in a way.
He does. He seems like he's a broken man. Mm-hmm. We don't really know much about him.
No, but I'm excited to learn more.
Again, we're only one episode in. I haven't figured out the whole series yet. Give me 5 more minutes.
It's all about Looking Glass.
So then next we see Judd goes to the victim officer's home to let the wife know about the incident.
Yeah, what a an ominous kind of scene this is, So he stations like 4 officers standing outside her house. Pretty big house, by the way, too.
For
being a cop is apparently a pretty lucrative
not only a
situation.
Cop, but we later find out that being a cop, you have to hide your identity, so everybody has kind of a fake job that they have or whatever,
alias,
an alibi, if you will.
Right.
And theirs was that he's going to night school to be an engineer. So he's going to night school, and he affords this pretty sizable house in Oklahoma. But
yeah, so Judd comes in and he's all smiles and whatnot, but there's definitely this undercurrent I felt like of intimidation. He sits her down in the kitchen and just gently but firmly asks her, who else knew that he was a cop, and really trying to read her pretty hard. And she's aside from being distraught because her husband is in the hospital, she seems really trying to be clear and direct, and that he didn't tell anybody.
We really establish how secretive you have to be when you're a cop. No one can know what you really do.
There's this culture of kind of intimidation among the police. I feel like like having these masked anonymous police outside her house, they're standing there with, if not their guns, then like nightsticks or something. I don't know if they were authorized to have. I don't know if Panda let them have guns for this little house call, but it's definitely a different kind of police than we're used to. A very exaggerated version of them than what we see in our world.
Anything else we want to talk about for that scene, or we cover that?
I mean, I could talk about that scene all day.
Go ahead. 10 more minutes of that scene.
No, I lied.
cut to, then we see Angela Abar in school, and you kind of hear her talking, but while she's talking, you see on the TV breaking news, Dr. Manhattan spotted on Mars.
Was that breaking news?
It said breaking news.
Okay.
It was like a 24/7 news channel.
Yeah.
And so it seems like that's big news that Dr. Manhattan has been spotted. So that tells me that we haven't seen a whole lot of Dr. Manhattan since he
spotted, what was he doing?
There was an enormous structure which looked kind of familiar.
Like a sand castle?
A castle.
That he turned to just disintegrated to dust.
Later, we see Ozymandias with...
Who we assume is Ozymandias. Jeremy Irons.
If he's not, I will eat my own hat. You heard it here, folks.
Wearing a hat.
I'm going to get a hat and I'm going to eat it.
What kind of hat?
Trilby?
How do you think trilbies taste?
Like fabric?
What if it's a leather hat?
I didn't specify what the hat was made out of. Are there any edible hats? It's probably there's edible.
There's this guy Paul Stamets who studies mushrooms. He actually has a hat made out of a mushroom fabric. Yeah.
That's the hat that I choose to eat. Are these psychedelic mushrooms?
I know that he is a fan of psychedelic mushrooms. I don't think his hat is psychedelic though, except that it looks cool.
Well, let's just hope that I'm wrong and I have to ingest this psychedelic hat.
So anyway, yeah. About
Dr. Manhattan, I guess we're led to believe that since his disappearance, there have been very few spottings of Dr. Manhattan.
Few sightings of the Doctor, yeah.
So you see him building this enormous structure which looks remarkably like a castle that we will see later on in the episode.
Yeah. In fact, it's got some very striking similarities to a castle we see Jeremy Irons ride a white horse into. Horse imagery is something that comes up in the show a lot, too. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. But right now, so back to this classroom.
Still, with the Dr. Manhattan thing, I remember seeing in some sort of a teaser, Dr. Manhattan almost looks at the camera like he knows he's being watched. Did you see that? Do you remember seeing that?
No.
It was one of the teasers. You see him on Mars. It was almost that same scene, but then after he destroys the castle, he looks like at the camera.
Oh, really?
As if he knows he's being recorded.
All right, I'm going to have to look that up because that sounds really cool.
I don't know where it was. I haven't seen it since. It was one of the teasers. So that might be in a later episode, but wouldn't that be interesting if he knew he was being watched, so then he just...
So maybe since he's supposed to be this quantum-powered superhero, he can see particles and manipulate them on tiny scales, Alan Moore described him as trying to make a quantum man. So maybe if he's being watched by a camera, he can tell that he's being observed, a quantum particle being observed changes its behavior.
Even from Mars.
Even from Mars, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a physicist, but I think that sounds like a cool idea, at least on a sort of literary level.
So yeah, we get to see Dr. Manhattan, guys. The big our man in blue,
and from a distance, no dong.
No dong. And then Angela is talking about her days in Vietnam.
The 51st state.
The 51st state. We see some interesting posters in the classroom. Jimmy, do you remember?
Yeah, so we see this one that shows the anatomy of a squid really prominently in the back of the classroom. When I was in school, I don't remember seeing any posters about squid, but I don't know. Why might they have posters of squid in this world?
Well, I can't say for certain, but I think it's because it periodically rains squid. I think that might be why.
It rains squid. Is that an expression, like saying it rains cats and dogs? Like it's raining squid outside.
It's raining squid. In this version of America, yeah, that's an expression. So
no, it literally rains squid in Watchmen. As you know, because you watched the show, if you're listening to this, or if not, then you don't care about spoilers. So you're probably very confused.
Other posters on the wall. We talked about the presidents. You've got Robert Redford up there with Lincoln and Nixon.
Yeah, so Robert Redford has been president for something like 30 years.
I think it was 8 terms, so I guess 8 times 4, 24?
Something like that.
Something like that.
At the tail end of the book, of the comic book, there's if you're really looking for it, there's a newspaper headline that says RR to run for president in '88, and then who is it? The editor of the New Frontiersman mentions, or who was it? Seymour mentions that Robert Redford is running for president, and the editor's like, we don't dignify absurdity with coverage. Find something from the Crank file, and we'll run that.
So yeah, how great is that? Damon takes that little line of dialogue in the graphic novel and makes Robert Redford president.
Pretty great. And not only that, but casts Robert Redford as himself, which I think is fantastic.
I don't know that we're actually going to see him as president. I think we just see mention of it.
You know what?
Maybe still photos, but yeah.
We've seen his picture around and stuff. I guess that's good enough for me.
That's good enough for me.
I would love to see him on the show, though. I bet he would do it.
Then we see she's doing a little like bakery demonstration, cracking eggs into a bowl. And you'll notice that she puts them into a nice smiley face.
Smiley face. And one of the eyes of the smiley face has a bit of red.
A little red, like a little blood spatter.
Very, very subtle, Damon.
Talks about how without protein, the egg yolk just falls apart.
Yeah, so...
what else did we see that falls apart?
That is kind of an oddly specific line of dialogue, because, like, you know, an entirety of an egg is, like, made of proteins, right? So... I think it's definitely an allusion to things falling apart, things very easily falling apart when you just take away a little bit. Like the squid, they tend to disintegrate shortly after landing. They just kind of evaporate.
I don't think that's an accident that she's talking about the lack of protein. It falls apart. So perhaps these squid...
I think it also kind of refers to the state of society. Like, so I think throughout the episode we kind of see... Unlike the comic book, society today is kind of like this really polished, kind of neat, tidy, orderly sort of thing. You know, students are all in uniforms, the police all do their job, everything's clean, everything's bright. But I think that she might be foreshadowing a little bit that all it takes is a little protein and everything can fall apart.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And the death of Judd. Death of Judd could very well be the straw that broke the camel's back. It sets some events in motion.
This sounds like a similar story
like
structure
to me.
Yep.
So she's in class. What else do we want to talk about in that scene? We've got the little...
There's a lot in that scene, actually.
You got the American flag has the extra star.
Yeah, so the American flag looks very different now. It's got a circular field in the middle. I do feel like it's kind of a callback to like Dr. Manhattan's circular symbol, you know?
Sure.
Putting the stars in a circular field.
Who was the woman that...
Betty Ross?
Betty Ross.
Was that her name, or is that from the Hulk?
Betsy Ross? Betsy
Ross, who designed the flag.
I haven't seen any movies about the
I'm not a history
of the American
buff.
flag, so I don't know. And then she goes kind of in depth about her living in Vietnam. She was there. The teacher asks if she was in Vietnam before or after it became a state, and she says it was a few years before. And she lived in Saigon. She was a police officer there when she moved to America.
The U.S., yeah.
The U.S.
Well, the rest of the U.S. The continental
U.S. She was a police officer for a bit, retired, and became a baker. Apparently, why did she retire?
Well, apparently she was present for what they call the White Night, which, as you mentioned earlier, is when a bunch of the 7th Cavalry raided the homes of police officers and attacked them, shot them. And unfortunately, or fortunately because she survived, our hero, Angela Abar, was shot in that incident.
Where was she shot?
She points to it, a section in her lower abdomen. So...
I feel like there's some significance to that. I have a bit of a theory on that.
She gets a little specific, too, with it before the teacher cuts her off for being graphic, yeah.
Which, you on the surface, you think she's just getting too graphic for the children, but perhaps she got cut off before she could say something.
When a TV show does something like that, I think it's kind of like a flag, like, hey, you know, like, check this out, this is important. Why do you think it's important?
So, my theory is she's got a couple different children who are white, and her husband is black. So I'm not a geneticist, but typically...
Her kids are adopted, is what you're saying.
I'm getting it, yeah. So perhaps she was either with child when she got shot in the abdomen, or as a result of being shot, perhaps she can no longer bear children.
That is a really good observation. I didn't pick up on that the first time I watched it, or the second time. But now
maybe the third time.
Maybe. Or maybe that's not true at all and there's a completely different reason.
It could
that we don't
entirely be wrong. I've been wrong before, at least once.
So what else? I think we got one kind of more big thing in the classroom scene.
I think we're talking the same thing.
Yeah. So
squids.
One of the students.
We talked about that.
One of the students, some little shit, asks her if she paid for her bakery with what he calls redfordations.
Redfordations. We don't really know exactly what that means.
It sounds like something...
Certainly related to reparations and also a certain president named Redford.
Yeah, so like, I guess in the same way that people refer to the, Affordable Care Act as Obamacare, there's a similar sort of law where they refer to something Robert Redford passed as Redfordations, a reparations act or something. And so it's Angela takes offense to that question right away, so that would suggest that it's a sensitive subject. It's a politically divisive sort of issue, and her son even freaks out and tackles the kid.
Yeah, her son Topher punches the kid, and that's the end of that scene.
So this kid Topher is kind of interesting to me. I don't know about what you thought, but just the way he shows up and the things he does in the episode, I feel like he might come to play some kind of part in the narrative to come in the story. I don't know. What do you think?
Definitely. He's an interesting character. He's got a lot of angst for a 10-year-old. So we cut to them driving home. Topher's got a bloody nose as a result of, I guess, a little fight that ensued. And next thing we hear, we've got some sirens. What do those sirens indicate?
So it sounds like tornado sirens. Angela seems, a little peeved. Like she pulls over her car. We see other cars pull over and people walking on the sidewalk whip out umbrellas.
Right.
And the sky turns this, hazy shade of purple.
Purple.
As baby squids start raining from the sky.
Now, what's the significance of the color purple in Watchmen?
So the color purple actually shows up a lot in the comic book because, like I said before, a lot of the art is like secondary colors as opposed to the primary colors of most superhero comics. And purple is pretty prominent in a lot of the backgrounds and whatnot. And it's also strongly associated with a particular superhero character whom we know and love as Ozymandias.
Ozymandias, the man made famous by the squid attack. He's well known for that.
So we have his color associated with the squids. I feel like there's a little bit of hinting that this is related to something with his plan.
I think when it's raining squid and when it's raining squid and the sky turns a shade of purple, I think all signs point to Ozymandias.
It can only be Ozymandias. So yeah, like what a clever way to sort of keep people in the dark and afraid of an interdimensional squid popping into your reality is now it has this lasting effect of baby squid raining from the sky. Like how kind of terrifying is that?
So for people unfamiliar with the graphic novel, what is the significance of the squid?
So in the story, spoiler alert if you're unfamiliar with the graphic novel, but Ozymandias is one of the superheroes whose entire plot, it turns out he's, the villain, and his plot is he created this genetically engineered psychic giant squid, which he then teleported into the middle of New York City. And when he did so, it released this powerful, like, psychic mental blast, which killed millions of people, gave nightmares to millions more, and visions of, extra-dimensional worlds and some craziness as a way of creating an external enemy for humanity to focus on so that they wouldn't fight each other. And that was his way of putting an end to the conflict between us and the Soviet Union.
So his justification for killing millions was that he saved billions.
And from the world that we see in this iteration of Watchmen, it does seem to have kind of worked, Like I said, everything's kind of orderly and clean, and people, at least on the surface, seem mostly happy.
But I think you're right. There's that underlying tension that's just waiting for something to
Absolutely, there's a lot of
it.
tension.
Yeah. So the squid rains from the sky. We kind of talked about how they deteriorate shortly after landing. They kind of turn into little gelatinous blobs And then you've got the cleanup crew. There's these gigantic street sweepers with squid.
Yeah, naturally, like if it rains squid on a regular basis, why not? You come up with trucks and whatnot to go around and clean that up. And we see one of Angela's kids is kind of having fun hosing down the sidewalk, cleaning up the squids when she gets home. Like, it's no big deal, it's been raining squid for 30 years. You kind of get used to it, I guess.
The world needs squid cleaners too. But yeah, I love how you hear the sirens go off and she's just like, oh God, not this again. Like, it happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think that is? Is this an effect? Is this related to the initial gigantic squid incident? This is just kind of the aftermath?
I think it's some kind of effect that I assume Ozymandias put into place to just keep the threat in everybody's minds. So even though it happens every so often, you get used to it. Horror kind of becomes something you get used to. I think that's kind of another theme of the show, that when you see something terrible enough times, you start to forget how bad it is. But it's also to keep everybody a little bit paranoid that there's something out there, something they don't understand that might break through.
Keeps everybody in check.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think that Ozymandias is still in complete control, or do you think that this might be the government perhaps covering up what really happened?
I don't think the government knows what really happened.
You don't think the government knows?
No, I think the government is as much a pawn in this as any other players. I think this is Ozymandias' plot. I don't think he's the kind of person who would trust the government to carry on that sort of...
I don't know that he necessarily entrusted them to take it on, but I do think that I don't want to get into a situation where Ozymandias becomes like Jigsaw, where somehow he had plans way, 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 way into the future that he couldn't possibly have set into motion. You know what I mean? You've got like Saw 20, and he's been dead for at least 10 movies, and he's still calling the shots somehow. Like, there is Ozymandias, as smart as he may be, I do feel like there might be bigger things at play, keeping the public in the dark. Mm-hmm. I think perhaps the government knows the truth, and rather maybe they want to ride the peace, the temporary peace, like you talked about.
Maybe
I feel like that might be part of it, that the government's intentionally keeping the public in the dark.
Could be. I mean, who knows? Ozymandias is obviously still plotting, as we see, or has been plotting. He's a plotter. He's a schemer.
He's just writing a play.
Well,
a tragedy of 5 acts.
Yeah, but I think we know what the subtext is there. It's after the squid.
So she drives home and she finds out
she gets a
page, because pagers are still a thing here. And it says Little Bighorn.
Couldn't kill pagers.
Which we kind of talked about the significance of Little Bighorn. It was
battle in the Indian Wars. Yeah,
Custer's last stand was at Little Bighorn, and apparently it was one of the most substantial losses that the U.S.
against
the U.S. infantry regime.
The U.S. against the Native Americans, lost at the Battle of Little Bighorn. But I think the significance of that has to do with, it's a call to action. It's her bat signal to go and do her superhero thing at the bidding of her police overlords.
So she rushes off to her bakery.
Her bake cave.
You see, as she's approaching, you see a giant blimp in the sky that has advertisements for American Hero Story.
Yeah, and on the bus, too.
And you've got this loud, like, megaphone or some sort of a speaker.
An airship,
just blaring advertisements above you. And that gives you kind of an idea of the world that they're living in. Blimps are a thing.
And you notice that there's a dude holding a sign that says, so you remember Rorschach in the original book, his alter ego would carry a sign saying the end is nigh, like he's one of those crazy homeless people, purporting the end of the world. This one is in a similar contrast that we've been seeing a lot of. Some dudes is twirling a sign that says the future is bright.
Future is bright, and it has an image of the Statue of Liberty upside down. And then shortly after that, we see a newspaper headline, and among other things, it states that the Statue of Liberty was closed due to vandalism by the 7th Cavalry.
A lot of details in this scene. They pack a lot into this show. It's kind of amazing. Just how eagle-eye you have to be to kind of pick up on everything. Her short
walk from her car to her bakery, yeah, there's quite a bit crammed in there. And then also in the newspaper is a big headline that says Adrian Veidt is officially declared dead after a long, I don't know.
He's been missing for quite some
time, and now he's been officially declared dead.
It's interesting. That's the main headline for that article. So
that was the main headline.
It's we can skip ahead a little bit. Yeah, keep going with.
So yeah, Veidt officially declared dead, and the date is 9/9 of 2019. So September 9th. Another headline is Boise squid shower destroys homeless camp.
Oh wow!
Any significance to that? I mean, other than just another squid.
I mean, it's more world building. It shows that the squid thing is pretty far reaching. Boise, Idaho is pretty far from New York, which was the epicenter of the original squid.
And the other headline was KKK vandalism forces Statue of Liberty closure.
Okay.
So it's KKK.
So it wasn't the 7th
not
Cavalry.
7th Cavalry, my apologies. Completely different.
Right.
She goes into the bakery, which is called Milk and Hanoi Bakery. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Clever little name there.
And so as she's going in, she passes somebody who asks her when it's going to open. Her bakery is apparently still it's closed. It hasn't opened yet.
He looked kind of familiar to me.
So we see who must be, I assume, that little kid from the intro from the Tulsa race riot. Now an old man sitting in a wheelchair wearing a bright red vest. He asks her if she thinks he can lift, 200 pounds?
200 pounds.
Kind of a weird question, but whatever. Weird flex, but okay.
Yeah. And she just kind of brushes it off, says, sure you could, and then goes into her bakery. In the bakery, she's got some kind of a secret door with a password protected.
Yeah, she's got a password protected freezer in her bakery where she keeps all the best baked goods.
And her password is 1985. Any significance to that date?
That's the year I was born.
Me too.
How about that? But yeah, 1985 is when the setting of the graphic novel is. It starts in, I think, October 12th, 85 is when Rorschach's journal places the beginning of that story.
You get to see she opens up a little drawer with a bunch of weapons, religious-themed weapons.
This is really cool. We went ahead and paused it because we want to see all the tools of her trade, you know?
You got a crucifix with blades on the end of it.
Yeah, she has, aside from her police badge, pretty standard, she also has a rosary.
The rosary.
With really thick beads and a pointed crucifix on the end of it. What else does she have in there?
What looked like an ice pick of some sort?
An ice pick. It looks like a tactical or glass breaker, like one of those tactical pens you can get. What else? Is that it? Did she have
the main ones? The rosary was the most prominent, and yeah.
So what do you think is the deal with that? Her alter ego, we find out, basically she dresses up as sort of a stylized nun, right?
Yep, Sister Knight.
Yeah. So why would she choose a nun? Do you have any thoughts?
I really have no thoughts on that. I don't know the association with her and nuns.
Yeah, I don't know.
Unless it goes back to her childhood, where she had a nun for a teacher, and the nun would beat her with a ruler.
Nuns are known for that.
They are.
Why doesn't she have a ruler as one of her weapons?
That actually, I feel like they missed the boat. They should have had a ruler.
A yardstick.
For sure.
That she uses to beat guys down. We do see her, later when she interrogates a dude, she whips out her rosary and puts it around her fingers like she's going to punch the dude with it, and I feel like that would hurt.
Does she? Oh, so she uses it kind of like brass knuckles almost?
Yeah.
Nice. I didn't catch that. So then, yeah, she goes into her little bakery cave, gets her weapons, drives off in the Nunmobile.
Yeah, so she races down to what is colloquially referred to as Nixonville. It's like a trailer park with a big statue of Nixon out front.
And what is she doing in Nixonville?
She busts down some dude's door. Nixonville also, is a scene with a lot of little details to kind of look at. Do you have any of those that stand out to you?
You got what was it? Fuck Redford.
Fuck Redford is like spray painted on one of the trailers.
So clearly not a fan of the president.
Right. There's like American flags, but they're not like the new American flags.
The original, not original, but the one we're more familiar with before Vietnam was added as a star in a state.
The old 50 states that we're used to. So
That's my America. So apparently apparently Nixonville is known for housing a bunch of 7th Cavalry members. So she comes there, busts into some guy's trailer. I don't know how she knew which trailer to go to. It seemed like she was pretty...
She knew exactly where she was going.
Exactly where to go. It tells me that there's some history.
There's a lot about Sister Night we don't know. Even though she's the main character, she kind of gets a lot of screen time in this episode. But there's also a lot of little mysteries about her too that are kind of unsolved. And we can get into some of those in a little bit. But yeah, she goes straight to this dude's trailer, punches him in the face, puts him in her trunk, and drives off straight to the police station.
And next thing you know, she's showing up at the police station, and Judd, what's his last name?
Crawford.
Judd Crawford is. They're all like a town hall situation where they're watching a terrorist video.
Police meeting. Police meeting. Or something.
Where they're premiering the latest episode of the 7th Cavalry terrorist video.
Yeah, so the 7th Cavalry have released a pretty disturbing, threatening video of warning of some plot, some attack in which they're all wearing Rorschach masks, like shitty versions that kind of like call back to like early Klansman masks, you know?
Yeah, it is.
And they quote or paraphrase, I should say, a lot of entries from Watchmen or from Rorschach's journal.
Yep.
Talking about the streets being gutters filling with liberal tears, and
they mentioned the black filth,
the whores and race traders will look up and shout, "Save us," and we will whisper no.
And they say, "We are no one, we are everyone, and we are invisible." And they seem to be in an old, decrepit church.
Something like that, yeah. And they chant "tick-tock, tick-tock" louder and louder as the video goes on.
So that what does that imply to you?
So it reinforces the ticking clock theme that is all over Watchmen, all over the comic book, and of course, again, all over the show as well. And it kind of is ominous, like time is running out, like something's coming, and it's coming very soon, and it's not going to be good. What exactly it is, I don't know. We can only speculate right now.
And then we hear Judd get up and say, we had 3 years of peace. We convinced ourselves that they were gone, but they were just hibernating. So that gives us kind of a time frame that 3 years ago was when the initial attack happened, the White Night, when the 7th Cavalry attacked police officers, and that's why they started hiding their identities after that event.
Indeed. So, as a result of this warning, Chief Judd, authorizes everyone to be able to use their weapons for a 24-hour period, which is apparently, what does he call it, like Article 4 or something?
Article 4 has been lifted, yeah. They take a temporary lift.
So our boy Panda, from the beginning of the episode, we finally get to see him, and he's a dude who wears a kind of a nasty-looking panda mask.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, to me, I feel like that's just kind of loaded with symbolism, because it's black and white, like a Rorschach mask. Mm-hmm. It's like another superhero identity, kind of a weird one to pick, a panda,
That is odd.
Mm-hmm. And he's a little obsessed with the rules, and he feels that this is a mistake. Like, Panda isn't all in on this approving use of force.
He's a sad panda.
Sexual harassment panda. In case you haven't noticed, we are big South Park fans, and we will quote it randomly throughout all of our episodes, so just prepare for that.
Spoiler alert. We spoil South Park as well. I think we just need to have a podcast called Spoiler Alert.
All
right.
Isn't every podcast
that's the end of that idea.
Killed that idea.
So then Article 4 is lifted, so now the law enforcement has free reign to use their weapons.
So it's kind of interesting. It seems like Panda is the only one in that room who doesn't feel like the police should be able to use their weapons. Like everybody else, Judd asks Looking Glass and Red,
Scare,
who's Red Scare, whom he refers to as Red, if they feel like their lives are under direct threat, to which they, of course, both say yes.
Direct, immediate threat.
Mm-hmm. Because, why wouldn't you? I mean, a cop just got shot the other day, or the night before. So, he winds up authorizing it, and Panda calls out that this is a big mistake, and Judd casually, foreshadowingly says, "It's my funeral."
Next, we see Judd going back to his office, and someone's there waiting for him.
It's Sister Night.
Sister Night got her feet kicked up on his desk,
sipping from his own coffee mug.
What was the coffee mug?
It was an owl-shaped coffee mug.
Owl. He's also got a book under the hood on his desk, which is another Night Owl
autobiography
reference.
of Hollis Mason, the original Night Owl. So this guy's like a Night Owl fan at the very least. He's got an Archimedes. He's got an owl coffee mug. He looks the appropriate age to be Dan Dreiberg. I'm just saying, he could be Dan Dreiberg.
There are a lot of, he could very easily be Dan Dreiberg. We don't really know.
It would fit with to jump ahead a little bit, he dies at the end of the episode, framing the beginning of the story sort of like the comedian's death in the original. Mm-hmm. The comedian was a superhero whose identity was at the time unknown, a retired superhero. It would make a lot of sense if Judd Crawford is Night Owl in retirement, living under a different identity, and gets murdered by, I don't know, somebody, some 105-year-old man apparently.
Even in the graphic novel at the end, he and Lori assume different names, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he takes the name Sam Hollis. They're a tribute to Hollis Mason.
They're complicit in Ozymandias' plan somewhat. They're aware of it, and they decide to go along with it because basically the damage is already done. People have already died, so if they outed Adrian at that point, then it was all for nothing.
Indeed.
So at least now, potentially they could save some lives. So it could very easily be Dan Dreiberg.
I think so. I mean, I think for the end of this episode, that's my personal fan theory I'm going with. We'll see what is revealed in future episodes, but that's where my head's at.
I do feel like they're going to have to bring him in at some point, Dan Dreiberg.
Yeah, especially so
if this isn't him, I don't. Maybe there's some unknown actor that we haven't met yet. We haven't even heard of being cast. I don't know.
Could be.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So, and then when they're in the office, she asks why she's just now getting the Little Bighorn page.
Right. Yeah. So earlier when Judd was talking to Looking Glass, Looking Glass asked if he should call in Red Scare and Sister Night, and Judd turns him down for some reason. It
says no.
Seems a little cryptic, yeah.
Which is kind of weird. Like we go from him at the Oklahoma play. Mm-hmm. So what time of day do you think that could be? 8 o'clock at night, roughly.
It's hard to say.
7,
that could be pretty late. Yeah. Oh, so the officer pulled the dude over at like 9. Was it 9:30 something?
Did they specify a time?
Yeah, he says the time and date.
You're right.
And I think, is it me or does that time 9:30-ish seem to come up a lot in this episode? Like we see a lot of clocks.
Ooh.
So in the original comic book, a lot of clocks are set to like 12:50, 12:55, close to midnight, to sort of reinforce the ominousness of the situation, the doomsday clock, all this and that. It seems like in the show, the new time is around 9 or 10, 30, 35-ish, something like that. We might want to double check on that, but it looked like that was the case, and I'm just wondering that's kind of interesting to me, like maybe it was rolled back because the threat is not as ominous now. The doomsday clock is not at so close to midnight. It's a few hours. We've got a few hours until shit really hits the fan.
Plenty of time. So she asks why he didn't notify her, What did he say? Something about the babysitter?
Yeah, Judd asks her if her sitter bailed on her, to which she just, responds yes, but I get the feeling there's more to that than...
So it sounds like he invited her to go see Oklahoma, and she said that she couldn't go because the sitter...
Mm-hmm.
But then, later on at dinner, they bring up the sitter, and her husband has no idea what she's talking about. So... a little mystery going on there.
There's definitely... She was up to something, and we don't really know exactly what. And so I am very curious as to how that's going to be explored in future episodes.
So then Angela informs Judd that she has the 7th Cavalry member in her trunk.
Right.
And they decide to interrogate him. They put him in the pod. Then we cut to Looking Glass in the pod.
So the pod is pretty interesting. It's their method of choice for interrogation, it looks like. So we see this guy, he gets, he's handcuffed to the floor, sitting in a chair in this circular room with a bunch of screens and cameras positioned all around him. And our boy Looking Glass walks in, sits down.
And before he does anything, he's wiping his face, which almost looks like he's wiping sweat off of his brow. But after the second
bright
look,
yellow
I think he's just wiping
microfiber.
it to almost enhance how reflective his mask is, so that the victim can really see themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting little gesture. Like, why would you be wiping your face unless you're really shining up
that mask? Yeah.
So in another interesting sort of reversal of Rorschach, Looking Glass is also an expert interrogator, but he uses non-violent means where Rorschach will break someone's fingers, or break a glass in their hand to get them to talk, stuff like that. Our boy Looking Glass just asks some questions, exposes them to sort of psychological imagery, and measures their responses. So again, I love that sort of parallel, opposite mirror world Rorschach that Looking Glass is.
Yeah, the non-violent interrogation. What were some of the questions that he asked?
He asks him what he had for breakfast this morning.
What he had for breakfast, and as he says that, as he's being interrogated, you see the images in the pod change. It's like basically having a projection screen behind them. Mm-hmm. When he asks about breakfast, there's like a milk advertisement.
Mm-hmm. You see a lot of images of like really traditional Americana kind of things.
Some pretty, innocent
amber
Americana
waves
things.
of grain,
some fields,
the
plains.
Statue of Liberty, stuff like that.
And then Looking Glass asks if the 7th Cavalry member thinks that the trans-dimensional attacks are hoaxes, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, so obviously since Rorschach's journal was published, it's kind of public knowledge that there's a theory, even if it's regarded as a fringe theory, that the interdimensional squid monster might have been a hoax.
And as he says that, you see images of the Twin Towers, as well as...
pretty direct reference to 9/11 inside job theory,
Right.
So that's pretty interesting.
So I'm on board with the conspiracy of the trans-dimensional attacks. Jimmy is a believer.
I'm pretty sure that Damon Lindelof in this scene is explicitly confirming that he believes, if not knows, that 9/11 was an inside job.
You heard it here, folks. You also see some pretty interesting imagery. A Nazi flag. I think there's Harriet Tubman in there.
Mm-hmm. You see a Confederate flag.
Flag.
Or at least a variation on it.
And again, the Statue of Liberty. I wonder, they've made a couple references to that now. You've seen it in that sign that said the future is bright. You hear that the KKK vandalized it.
I wonder if we'll see the Statue of Liberty at some point in the show. Or the Twin Towers. Like, do you think 9/11 happened in this world?
It's a good question.
That'd be kind of crazy. Like the world's a very different place. Maybe that sort of terroristic threat doesn't exist here, so the Twin Towers are still standing in New York.
They just have a lot of squid goo all over them because the cleaning crew can't get up.
I mean, that's a lot of windows to clean.
That is a lot of windows.
So what else does he ask?
He asks several times if he's a member of the 7th Cavalry, And he's like, I already told you no. But then he asks him again and again. And, I think then he exits the interrogation pod, and he's thoroughly convinced that this man is affiliated with the 7th Cavalry.
Mm-hmm. He mentions that he read his pupil dilation and things like that. He's very observant, and I think his mirror mask is a part of that. He is able to read what other people's faces are telling him without revealing what his face is telling. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very intentional and deliberate. And also, it creates like a really cool reflective effect as he's got these Rorschach patterns projected on the screens that are then reflected off his mask. Again, I love the visual and all the symbolism with Looking Glass. I'm a little bit obsessed with that aspect of the show. It's kind of amazing. He's the best. He's my favorite new costume for sure. That Looking Glass mask. I thought the Rorschach mask was really cool, but I agree. Like the Rorschach mask is super sweet. How do you top that? And it looks like, or at least how do you match it?
I think if we had the actual Rorschach mask where the pattern changes, then it would be cooler. But in this show, we see a poor man's Rorschach mask.
Yeah,
just like
and I feel like that kind of tells us a little something. They're sort of imitation Rorschachs, like they're Aldi brand Rorschachs.
Right. Another interesting image you see is Mount Rushmore, but you've got Nixon's face.
Yeah.
In there. So Looking Glass comes out and says that he was off the charts on the bias questions. His eyes dilate whenever Rorschach was mentioned.
Yeah.
And then, so that's all that Sister Night needs to. She was already pretty convinced that he was 7th Cavalry. She's got a nose for it. And
I like Sister Night has this sort of one player good cop bad cop thing where she's escorting the guy away, and she's like, we're all a little frazzled since a cop got shot, so I apologize for the way I treated you. And the guy's like, well, it's okay. And she's like, I'm glad to hear you're okay with it. And then shoves him into a room, and you just hear her beating on him. She wraps her rosary around her fist and just starts beating on him, and then you see water coming out from under the doorway with some blood. Which is a familiar image if you've read the comic, because, in the very beginning of the comic, we see blood being washed off a sidewalk with water. It shows up a lot. I love the parallel imagery
for sure
being used.
So we talked about how Looking Glass has some parallels to Rorschach. Sister Night seems to be that darker side of Rorschach that enjoys the brutal interrogating. She doesn't seem to mind getting her hands dirty.
Definitely
She
not.
almost seems to be excited when she's given license.
I don't
know
if I blame her. She got shot in the abdomen and whatnot.
Fair point.
But at the same time, it kind of goes to show how, when you put on a mask and become a superhero, or put on a badge and become, a cop, you kind of have this elevated sort of impunity to do these kinds of crazy things. And again, just the cops in this world have this very different set of standards from what we think of a cop should have in our world, So the cops can't use their weapons, but they can also interrogate, torture, and just beat down people with no due process. I don't know. It's kind of crazy to me. I'm curious to see more.
What did he say? He says he's not. I forget.
The dude wanted his lawyer.
Wanted
and he's
my
like,
lawyer.
We don't have to do that for terrorists. Yeah.
So Angela ends up interrogating / waterboarding, gets some sort of a confession out of him, and she finds out that they're at the cattle ranch. Mm-hmm. So then they all head out to the cattle ranch.
We got a brutal cattle ranch scene as they're sneaking up on a little hideout where a bunch of our 7th Cavalry dudes are in Rorschach masks, and they're disassembling watches for their batteries.
Putting them in a big bucket,
yeah.
We don't quite know what their ultimate plan is.
No.
But we do know that these batteries are some type of... They've been outlawed.
Or at least recalled.
Apparently they make people sick.
That's the word on the street.
That's what the official story is. Mm-hmm. But there's a cover-up there as well. Probably.
So yes, in the comic, Dr. Manhattan was purported to give people cancer with his powers, which was being faked by Ozymandias. So now there's this paranoia, I guess, that all the technologies that he created, the lithium that he made to put into batteries and things to accelerate the electrical technology, might also cause cancer. I get the feeling that that's also just, propaganda, a fear campaign, fear-mongering to get people to, stay in line.
So then the 7th Cavalry somehow gets tipped off that the law is there. So they get some guns and they get some pills. What were those pills, Jimmy?
Yeah, so these guys are pretty hardcore, dedicated. They each keep a suicide pill in their mouth that looks like a cyanide pill, like from which is another callback to the graphic novel when an assassin who went after Ozymandias in his office also had a suicide, or died as a result of suicide pill. Whether or not he actually had that or whether Ozymandias forced it into his mouth is...
Do you think this implies that the 7th Cavalry is under Ozymandias' influence?
I don't think we can rule that out, but I'm not sure there's... that's a good question.
It's a great question.
That is a good question.
I mean,
I don't know.
Ozymandias, he's pretty good at pulling the strings.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because Rorschach's journal gets out, right? That's not part of Ozymandias' plan. So these are a fringe group that believes that Rorschach's journal is the truth. I think spinning their goings on as fringe sort of conspiracy nutjob terrorism kind of stuff is the best Ozymandias has to defend himself from them.
Perhaps they just read that chapter in Rorschach's journal with the cyanide pills and that gave him some ideas.
Maybe.
So, gigantic fight ensues. There's a lot of bullets flying, cows getting blown to bits. And then we get a little air fight, a little air battle with Archie and a little plane. Yeah,
so they have an old-fashioned charter plane behind the house, which two of them manage to escape with a bucket full of batteries in, while the other two stay behind and man a 50 cal machine gun and try to hold off the police. So the plane takes off, and Sister Night, radios to Judd that they're taking off. You got to take them down. They're right under you. So Judd and who is it? What'd you say her name was?
I think it's Pirate Jane.
So we see another masked superhero person piloting Archimedes.
Which we should say, it certainly looks like Archimedes, but you also see on the underside of it, it says police. So,
Archie could have had a paint job.
That, or when Night Owl sort of retires, I think in the graphic novel, the police raid his little hideout. Mm-hmm. So it's entirely possible that they found his tech.
They confiscated it,
and then ended up replicating it and mass-producing some flying ships, similar to Archie.
That's a possibility.
I did hear Damon Lindelof said in some sort of an interview that it's very possible that we'll see the original Archie at some point in the show.
Unless we already did. Maybe it's first episode we saw the original Archie.
Possible too.
But yeah, anyway, so he uses the classic flamethrower attack to take down this plane. Obviously just obliterates any suspects, but whatever. And because Judd pushed the engines a little too hard in the attack, the ship winds up crashing as well. But he just walks it off.
But he's okay.
Somehow. Yeah.
Pops out, just starts laughing about it.
So was it weird to you that Judd is sort of standing in the ship? He's not like strapped down to a chair or anything. We see it fall out of the sky and like tumble over a couple times as it crashes into the ground, and he's able to just kind of pop open the hatch and get out and laugh it off. He and Pirate Jane both.
Night Owl confirmed.
Well, even Night Owl would he necessarily be able to do that? Like, he doesn't have powers.
No, he doesn't. No, I thought that was horribly irresponsible of him to not buckle up. Safety first. That's my motto. Another thing we should mention is that when Sister Night is battling the 7th Cavalry members, she chases one of them inside of their hideout. That's when he chews the cyanide pill. And then you see there's a poster on the wall. What was that poster, Jimmy?
Oh, yeah. So, they have a poster of, looks like Dollar Bill from the original comic book, who, it's like an ad with Dollar Bill, an ad for a bank, where he's holding
a national bank poster, and he's got
he's holding by the collar a black dude, and there's the caption on the poster says, "Our banks are clean and we keep out the riffraff."
Extremely racist bank advertisement. That's the kind of posters that the 7th Cavalry like to adorn their home with.
So I've heard, I'd want to look into this a little more, but I've heard that until like something like the 60s or something, there was actually a law on the books that specifically kept black people from being able to borrow money from banks. Like it was another sort of loan stipulation was that it was more difficult for African Americans to be able to borrow money. And this was actually, a legit law across the U.S. until pretty recently. So I feel like that culture is kind of reinforced in that poster as well.
Any other thoughts on that scene before we move on?
Oh, man. So much. So many cows.
So many cows.
Ground beef. There's a big machine gun, blew a cow to smithereens.
And then we transition up into the stars.
Oh, that's right. There's a really cool scene transition. Yeah, it shows a star field above, as our heroes are laughing
off
as they just successfully eliminated these terrorists. And our camera pans to the stars, and in a cool way transitions to this green field, what looks like a very sort of European countryside, and a castle. The very similar castle to the one we saw being dusted by Dr. Manhattan on Mars earlier.
So yeah, we look up to the stars, and we see a castle similar to the one that Dr. Manhattan had on Mars. Makes you wonder, are we even on Earth at this point?
Right, like, we see, this is where we see Jeremy Irons right in on his white horse.
So we see Jeremy Irons' character, which we presume to be Adrian Veidt, or Ozymandias.
We presume to be. I still think there's some wiggle room on that issue, but I don't know. We'll get into that in a bit.
He may be Night Owl. We don't know.
He could be. I don't know if he might be a little older to be Night Owl. I don't know. He's not though. He's British.
He's definitely not Night Owl. All right. So yeah, Ozymandias is riding a white horse up to a castle,
and as was established earlier in the show, a white horse is kind of been implanted as a symbol of what the bad guys ride, the bad guys who are pretending to be good guys.
Right.
I don't know, that whole thing. But yeah, so he's in this very British-looking countryside riding up to a big castle. He's got servants. He's got a stable boy. He's got a maid and a butler. He's got it all, man.
He's got it all. He's living the life in a castle. So once he arrives at the castle, you cut to a scene of him sitting naked at a typewriter, getting his thigh massaged by Miss Crookshank.
I do all my best typing naked, so I understand that where he's coming from with that.
Getting a nice thigh job.
Thigh massage, yeah. So Miss Crookshank is very enthusiastically rubbing his thighs. She mentions how raw he is, and he said he went for a long ride yesterday or whatever.
Yep.
Before his other servant, Mr. Phillips, walks in, asking if he could dress him, and holds up a suit. Very
formal suit.
Yeah.
And he asks, what's the special occasion? And apparently it's an anniversary.
Yeah, so we have... Man, this is a very surreal scene, and
so
absolutely bizarre, and there's so much to unpack from it. Like, what's Jeremy Irons celebrating? What is this anniversary? Who are these weird servants who act just slightly off?
They act very different.
So they wind up making him a cake to celebrate this anniversary, which he eats in his big room. Who is it? Miss Crookshanks mentions that they used a honeycomb that he gave them.
Yep. As I guess one of the ingredients for this cake she baked.
Also kind of a weird little reference. Like, why would he have to give them a honeycomb?
Yeah, very bizarre.
And he doesn't seem to like the cake. Like, he takes one bite out of it, and he's like, he chokes it down, but then he,
calls it the bee's knees.
Yeah. Maybe it was literally just made with
bees'
a lot
of honey, bees' knees.
It's just had tons of bees inside of it.
Oh man!
When she used the honeycomb, she forgot to take the bees out.
Take the bees' knees out of there.
So yeah, he takes one bite and is done with that.
That's the end of that cake. But he really enjoyed it. And then Mr. Phillips also has a little surprise for him for his anniversary.
Yeah, he gives him this. It's wrapped in an animal skin.
Bubastis fur.
Joe is convinced it's Bubastis' fur. But we educated people know that Bubastis was disintegrated in the end of the graphic novel.
But we further educated people know that if you can create one Bubastis, what's to prevent you from creating an army of Bubastises? So it's entirely possible that you could get...
Ozymandias would not taint the memory of Bubastis with another Bubastis.
It would just be Bubastis 2 and Bubastis 3.
Well,
Similar to Snowball.
So how did those
3.
die? Anyway...
We don't know which number Bubastis were on
what's
here.
What's the gift? What?
So he opens it up, and we've got a gold pocket watch.
So there's our watch theme again.
The watch theme,
Watchmen
very
watch.
prevalent.
So yeah, apparently Mr. Phillips rebuilt or reconstructed this watch for for his master. They call him Master, which I feel like is a little much, but you know, Ozymandias, you do you, I guess. We didn't even mention the horseshoe. So like when Ozymandias is about to take a bite of his cake, Mr. Phillips asks him if he would like to cut it,
and he hands him a horseshoe.
So Ozymandias is like, that's a horseshoe. You don't cut with a horseshoe, silly. And so yeah, there's definitely something weird with these people.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're clones or if they're like...
So, yeah, a lot of people are under the impression that these are robots but I don't think they're robots.
I feel like cloning makes more sense.
I think cloning makes more sense. It fits more with the Ozzy MO. He's been known to genetically modify quite a few things, so why not humans?
There's also that possibility we in the comic book, Dr. Manhattan mentions wanting to create life as an experiment. Maybe these are some of Dr. Manhattan's attempts to make life, and he's just, a little off the mark, So you create this guy subservient to Ozymandias who can build a pocket watch based on a few discarded sketches, but doesn't really understand making cakes or cutting them or eating them. Maybe like they don't eat. I don't know.
Very bizarre.
Yeah.
So there's some great theories. Probably most of the theories are centered around this scene because this is just it's very like a dreamy sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Phillips?
Yeah. Mr.
Phillips.
Like a screwdriver.
Looks like he could be a John Osterman.
Kinda, yeah.
And Miss Crookshank looks like she could be...
Janie Slater? Is that what you're getting at?
That's what I'm getting at. So the theory is that Ozymandias is trying to recreate the conditions that resulted in Dr. Manhattan getting his godlike powers.
So you think, is he trying to is he going to test it on Mr. Phillips first?
It's entirely possible.
And then maybe give himself a little disintegration boost?
That, or, Ozymandias, he's the smartest man in the world. He came from great wealth. He ended up giving it all away so that he could start from nothing and build himself up again. Who better to attempt to disintegrate himself in order to rebuild himself?
If Osterman could do it.
If Osterman could do it, then certainly Ozymandias.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a theory floating around there. I don't think they're robots. I do think that they are clones of some sort, and that's why they're acting just a little off. They look human, but they're not all there mentally. Yeah,
so right after he gets his watch, which we also see is at that set to that time, it's ticking, but it's at the time, it's like 9:30, 9 something, right? Like
I think we said 10:37.
Okay, so it's somewhere around, it's not quite midnight. It's still a ways off from midnight.
Yeah.
Which I think is definitely an interesting choice. But then he announces to his servants that he's got a surprise for them. He's been writing a play that he wants them to play the leads in called The Watchmaker's Son.
And it's a tragedy.
Tragedy in 5 acts.
The Watchmaker's Son.
So that's clear reference to Dr. Manhattan, too.
So that kind of supports that theory that they're going to be the leading roles in his grand
experiment.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's entirely possible. I like that theory a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm holding on to that one. Anything else we want to talk about with this scene before we move on?
Oh, man. I don't know. I think we pretty much covered it. It's very mysterious, very surreal.
We don't know what the anniversary is. He's got one candle on the cake.
Honestly, I want to watch a whole show of this, of Ozymandias. and or Jeremy Irons doing British things in a castle.
And so we really don't even know if this castle is on Earth, as we mentioned before. I think the fact that you kind of transition into the stars, and as we all know that Dr. Manhattan is living on Mars, this is quite possible that Manhattan has created some sort of environment for Ozymandias to live in.
Yeah, so you just have to wonder, like, what kind of contact Ozymandias and Dr. Manhattan may have had with each other in the intervening years. Because at the end of the graphic novel, right, Manhattan disappears. He says he's going to go to a different galaxy, like one less complicated, and maybe he'll create his own life.
Right.
And then Ozymandias, he's in his hideout in Karnak, and he kind of turns his back on this model of the solar system, which might suggest, you could say he's turning his back on humanity, or you could say he's also gonna, go off to some other world and do weird things. Get thigh massages and ride horses all day.
Recreate Bubastis. I'm just saying. So then we cut to a bar household for dinner.
Ah, yes. So yeah, there's a really cool scene transition where, Jeremy Irons, or what is it? He toasts with his servants, and then we cut to an overhead shot of this dinner table that looks like a clock.
Looks like a clock, right?
And yeah, we got, so who do we have? We got Judd, his wife, we got Angela, her husband, and then the 3 kids.
3 kids,
yeah.
Right.
All sitting at the table, having, a grand old time.
2 of the kids are reciting the presidents.
Ah, yeah. So, like, we have, what looks like the youngest daughter is reciting all the presidents, and her son, Topher, is, like, kind of annoyed. Like, he's like, okay, we get it. Like, blah, your presidents. And so she mentions, Nixon, Ford, and Redford?
Redford.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think, I not to make it weird, but I don't know, like, watching the kids in this show is kind of an interesting tell about, society and the symbolism going on in the show. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot there. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I'm one drink in.
And then we see Judd excuse himself to get another drink, and then he snorts a little what we assume to be cocaine.
I'm sure it was nasal medication.
Probably. I'm sure he had a prescription. Comes back to the dinner table, and Angela kind of gestures to him that he's got a little something on his nose.
Yeah, we find out his wife saw it too. Like his cocaine habit is kind of an open secret, it looks like.
And then we get to that. They talk about the Oklahoma play, and Judd asks about the babysitter that fell through, and then Angela's husband looks confused.
Yeah, so this is a weird interaction because, they kind of play it off lightly. Angela mentions that, he hates musicals. Like, I was sparing you from all that because she was going to go to the musical with Judd, but didn't show. We still don't know why she didn't show, or. I mean, I guess it's assumed that she had to stay with the kids because the babysitter quit, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more there. There's definitely subtext. Definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of secrets going on at this dinner table.
So yeah, we also find out that, Judd's a big fan of Oklahoma, as any red-blooded Oklahoman would be.
Of course.
And he actually used to play in Oklahoma. He played Curly.
Who's the hero, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So after I did a vigorous Googling of Oklahoma, a vigorous Googling. I read the synopsis on Wikipedia. But so Curly is the main character, but there is another character in the play named Judd, who's basically the villain. So we have our character named Judd, who's playing the hero in the play Oklahoma. It just kind of comes full circle to that whole hero is the villain, villain is the hero sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we definitely have. so much more to learn about Judd
So much.
and Oklahoma. Rogers and Hammerstein.
And then we get to see Judd bust out his Oklahoma song.
We hear his singing chops
which is pretty impressive.
as he sings. What is this?
Goes around the table serenading.
They'll think that we're in love or something like that. Yeah.
And then, he goes around, hugs the kid, hugs Angela's husband, and then hugs Angela, and they seem to have a little tender embrace.
He hugs
there
Angela for a little while, yeah, before
It's a
going
decent
over to his
amount of
wife.
time,
Yeah.
right, yeah. You think there's any significance to that?
I don't know. Angela and Judd definitely have a pretty casual relationship. There's some history there, and I think
For sure.
flashbacks will probably reveal a lot more about their history.
Yeah. You don't think that Judd dying is the end of Judd? You think we're going to see some more Judd?
You know what? You might be right.
That's it.
I think Judd's
That's the
out.
end of it, right? Yeah.
Who was it? Don Johnson probably was only on for one episode.
Yeah.
You get a guy like Don Johnson to just do one episode. It was a cameo. No, definitely. If the comic book is any indication, we'll see a lot more of him in flashbacks. A lot of his history. Like if he's our stand-in for the comedian, being the one who was killed to set all this off
In motion, yeah.
Yeah, then there's probably a lot of secrets hiding in his very extensive closet.
For sure. So then we cut to outside. Angela and Judd are talking about the
batteries.
The batteries that they found at the little 7th Cavalry hideout.
Yeah, so that's where we get that little lore drop about them being the synthetic batteries that Dr. Manhattan made that made people sick, that you can't just find anymore. So Judd suggests that they might have been making a cancer bomb or something.
He kind of jokes as if it's not even a real concern, which leads me to believe that he's almost deflecting the severity of it, right?
Either that or he knows that they actually aren't a concern. Because in the comic book, we find out that, Dr. Manhattan's carcinogenic properties are a hoax. And if he's Dan Dreiberg, he would know that. So,
But he's not. He's Bubastis.
Bubastis has evolved into Judd Crawford. But then, he gives a very... He's very nonchalant throughout this scene. He says he's worried as fuck, but then smiles and winks and says, tick-tock, tick-tock.
I think that was the cocaine talk.
Is that what cocaine does?
And then in the terrorist video, she referenced that they said there's a mission and it's happening soon.
Yeah, so... Oh, man.
We don't know what their goal is. All we know is that they're hoarding batteries and that something big is going to be happening soon.
And then he takes off with his wife, says they're talking about the end of the world. He mentions it's the end of the world, even though there's nothing else to indicate that anything they're facing is the end of the world. So I feel like that was kind of a little out of place.
Yeah, I think Judd knows more than he's letting on.
Nah,
that's it.
No, Judd definitely knows more than he's letting on. But yeah, it's complicated, I'm sure.
So then we cut to the inside of Judd's home. And he's on the phone with the governor, basically explaining the situation with the 7th Cavalry, that they've all been taken care of, but there's always a lingering threat. There's always more of them out there. And then you notice he's got quite a few decorations adorned on his mantle and shelves.
Yeah, we went ahead and paused that scene to look at some of the stuff that's on his shelves because it's pretty interesting. Well, first... scene opens with a montage of the opening of American Hero Story. When we see sort of graphic representations of the Minutemen. And it's also kind of interesting that all the Minutemen are being shown via their reflections in the surface of the table. So we see, the comedian, we see Captain Metropolis, and eventually the only one we see not reflected is Hooded Justice, which is kind of interesting.
Stay tuned. I have a big theory about Hooded Justice.
Oh, boy.
What else do we see? We see at least 2 clocks. And what time was on the clocks?
So, yeah, we see one clock, a small clock on the mantle, and then on the shelf is a bigger clock, and they're both set, what is it, like 10:35 or something?
37.
Yeah, around that time, not quite our doomsday clock impending time. So reinforcing that motif.
Very interesting. You've also got a king and a queen white chess piece.
Yeah. So
Chess pieces.
yeah, how subtle a clue is that? It's kind of interesting because in this show we've got this strong themes of race and black and white and all that. And so in the home of Judd and his wife, the king and queen of the white side are on the shelf. Like, is that telling us that, I don't know, maybe Judd and his wife are like the maybe they are in league with the 7th Cavalry or something, or at least manipulating events in some racist-y kind of way? I don't know. It could mean a lot of things.
It could mean a lot of things. Maybe we're reading a lot into it, but certainly it fits in with the whole black and white motif.
I think when we're doing a podcast on the show, reading a lot into it is what we do. Is that part of this? Yeah. We're here to read into it.
Should we do more
so
of that?
You don't have to.
Mm-hmm. What else was on the mantle? Oh, we got a lot of horse motif going on.
Tons of horses.
Tons of horses.
So the horses are a pretty strong thematic element throughout the show.
I don't really know what to say much beyond that there were a lot of horses.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong symbol. I'm sure we'll see more horses. And I think horses have a lot to do with, what side of the fence our characters are standing on and sort of creating that ambiguity about the morals of our characters. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
So then, he hangs up with the governor, talks to his wife. She says that... he says something about how he sounded very confident.
Just saw confidence coming out of his nose.
Right. And he says that it's been a tough week. And then he gets another call and finds out that the officer that was shot earlier...
just woke up.
Yeah.
So that's good news.
So he gets dressed and he goes to his closet.
Says he's going to go visit him in the hospital.
Puts on his uniform. Wife's a little worried that he's been drinking and snorting cocaine. He says, don't worry about it. I'm going to have one of the officers drive me. It'll be fine. So he goes to the closet, and that's when you see him getting dressed, and you see the photograph in there that we kind of talked about earlier.
Yeah, there's this extended little shot where he's fastening his tie, and you see his reflection in a mirror, another mirror reference, and there's a blurry picture in the foreground that, eventually they slowly sort of focus in on. And it's a picture of a kid, a black and white photo of a kid with looks like a sheriff.
Police officer.
Some officer
wearing a
with
badge. Right.
Yeah.
So presumably you'd think that Judd would be the young boy in the photograph based on it's a black and white photo.
I don't presume anything.
I presume everything.
Well, we've been presuming this whole show.
Welcome to Presuming Watchmen.
I don't think that rolls off the tongue quite
I'm
as well.
Babastis.
Oh, yeah. So another parallel to the comedian, right? Because like in the beginning of the comic book, Rorschach finds all the comedian's stuff hidden in his closet. There's like an extended little montage in the comic book where he finds the secret false back closet where the comedian's stuff is in. So I definitely feel like that's a bit of a callback that we're going to see more in that closet. There's probably a bunch of stuff hidden in there. An owl coat, owl goggles, stuff like that.
An entire secret passageway to a basement where he keeps Archimedes and such.
Yeah, so that also ties into the photograph, too. Like, Rorschach finds the photograph of the comedian in the closet as well. So, I don't know. It all comes together. It's all full circle.
Closets, yeah.
Yeah. Closets are a symbol.
Big time. So he leaves there, and you see him driving, exiting his house. As he leaves there, he's got some guards stationed out, and they...
His house is huge,
pretty massive compound, yeah. But it's funny, it's the guards very quickly pull their masks up, as if they just got caught,
right.
doing something inappropriate.
Little uniform infraction.
Right. And Judd just kind of looks
Judd
disapprovingly.
says something to them that we don't hear.
We don't hear what he says, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Probably just like, keep an eye on the house, boys.
It's probably
Bring him in, boys.
Drives off by himself. He doesn't have the other officer drive him like he told his wife he would.
Does that mean he lied to his wife?
He did lie to his wife.
Who lies to their wife?
I don't. You know who doesn't? Night Owl.
Night Owl, that we know of, doesn't have a wife.
But if he did...
I don't know.
So what's interesting is that as he's driving away, you overhear a radio station talking about
Oh yeah,
Joel Keane.
You hear? Yeah. What is this? It's like a sort of a conservative-y type radio show, a Rush Limbaugh style situation or whatever. Talking about Senator Joel Keane, who after whom the Keane Act of '77 was named. Which, if you've read the comic book, the Keane Act is the law that outlawed the masked vigilantism, as if that wasn't already illegal or something. I don't know. But yeah, so he's apparently still like a political player in this world. And
you got whoever's talking is complaining about Robert Redford as president. He says, we got more land we can't live on, more animals we can't kill, and a 6-month wait to get a gun.
Yeah.
And if Joel Jr. wants to run for president, I'm all for it.
Yeah, so
it sounds like Keane's son might be a potential candidate for presidency.
Interesting. So yeah, and we see like a lot of so he's complaining about all these like I guess you could call traditionally liberal policies, gun control, keeping like animal ethics and things like that. That he's whining about. So that kind of gives us a clue as to the kind of things that President Robert Redford stands for in this world.
Right.
And the sort of political hot buttons that exist. Nice little world building touch.
That's right. And then he drives over some spiky spikes.
Yeah, some tire. Yeah, what do you call those? Tire spikes.
Spiky spikes.
Yeah,
I think that's the official term.
Exactly.
Gets out of the car, walks over to him, and then bright light flashes and starts pulsing real fast.
That's right. Yeah, they did have a bright light on him. That's so weird.
It's very weird. Bright lights are a recurring motif here as well throughout. And that's the last we really see of a living Judd.
It is. We cut to Angela, the A-bar couple, banging in their closet. Another closet.
Closets.
So they're going at it, and the phone starts ringing, which, as it always does.
Perfect timing.
See, landlines. Everybody uses landlines in this world. Nobody has cell phones.
Right. It's terrible.
Interesting.
They just keep ringing and ringing and ringing. That just didn't stop ringing.
But yeah, so she mentions how close she is before they have to stop, and she just goes and answers the phone.
Right. Very frustrated when she goes over there.
And we hear an old man's voice asking who she is, if she's Angela Abar, if her father
says
was
yes.
What was her father's name? Marcus
Abar?
Yeah.
And then she says yes. And then she asks, who is this? And
did she say yes, or did she just... I feel like she didn't confirm her father.
I think she said yes, but then immediately was like, who is this?
Okay.
And at that point, she was really concerned. Mm-hmm. Doesn't say who he is, just tells her to meet him at the oak tree on Roland Hill. Mm-hmm. And don't bother bringing your mask.
The old lynching tree.
I know who you are. So she goes... But behind her bed, they've got the headboard. She pushes like a little secret panel, and she's got some weapons stashed back there. A big gun. Hands one to her husband and tells him to shoot anybody who isn't her.
So with all the strict controls on guns we have, I guess her being a masked vigilante gives her exemptions to that.
Or she's just hiding them. Maybe they're not
also a possibility.
In
either case,
7th Cavalry has weapons as well, so it's not impossible to get weapons that aren't locked down.
Right. I don't know, but at the same time, Angela seems to be, for the most part, a pretty law-abiding person. She works for the cops. She seems to follow the rules. They seem to have, even if unofficially, some kind of rules or guidelines for how the masked people work. Mm-hmm. It's not really clear. I guess it's not really clear how public they are. I don't know. Do we really see them doing stuff in public? Or we don't see the public's response to them.
We don't, no. We just see the public's response to the masked officers, just the regular officers.
Yeah.
Not the costumed. So here's a question. Mm-hmm. We're only seeing Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's got, 4 or 5 different masked cops that we know of?
That we've seen, yeah. Uh-huh.
Are we to believe that the rest of the world also has masked cops? We're just getting...
It's a great question.
It would have to be, right? Why would Tulsa, Oklahoma be the only place with masked cops?
Yeah, I think this is definitely like a microcosm of the overall world. I think we can assume, at least in America, that most places are kind of run kind of similarly, maybe. I don't know.
So she gets the gun and rushes off to the tree. We see her driving up to the tree and then gets out of her car. Another bright
light shines on her again. She whips out her shotgun and tells them to turn the light off or she'll shoot. I mean, what else are you going to do? I feel like it was kind of dumb of her to drive up there by herself.
Yeah.
Not really tell anybody where she's going.
Especially after the guy basically says he knows who she is and he knows who her father is.
Yeah.
Seems like a very dangerous place to be.
But at the same time, what else are you going to do?
And she doesn't really even know what she's doing there.
Yeah.
She doesn't even know
she's there to
Judd's
see
involved.
something.
It's not like she's emotionally involved in whatever they have there. All she knows is that they know who she is.
Yeah.
Seems like a very dangerous situation.
Well, maybe, I guess she's like caving to like the leverage that, we know who you are. There's kind of an implied threat
if
that they could reveal that. Yeah.
It's going to be bad. Sure. So we see the man in the wheelchair from earlier from outside the bakery sitting at the tree.
Right. Do we see where that light was coming from?
We did not.
No, there isn't like a visible spotlight there. It was just coming from somewhere.
We don't really know. Yeah.
I don't know. That's super weird.
It is weird. I was looking for it. I didn't see any kind of a device that would have that kind of light. It was a lot of light. It was bright.
Yeah.
So we see in the tree our boy Judd hanging there.
One of his shoes is
is gone.
So I guess there was a struggle. Looks like there was a struggle. Like his clothes were messed up. He put up a fight.
Unless there's some significance to one shoe being off. I don't know.
I mean, he was pretty bloodied too.
Yeah. And then do they exchange words? No, I don't. She just kind of gasps.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't think he said really much.
I don't think this. I think all we do is we just see Judd hanging from the tree. You see Angela's shocked face, and then
we pan down to his police chief badge lying in the grass, and a single drop of blood splatters on it. Perfect, beautiful homage to the comedian's badge.
Beautifully done.
Yeah, what a cool sort of parallel symbol.
Yeah.
For that. I dig it.
Very well done. So, the man in the wheelchair, we don't even know his name, but we do know that he's the boy from the beginning of the episode because he's still got that.
He's got that piece of paper
note that his father put in there.
Watch over this boy. Yeah.
So I have a theory about this guy. You ready to hear it?
I'm ready.
He's watching that Western at the beginning with the man wearing all black. He's got like a black mask on.
He's Bass Reeves.
He's Bass Reeves.
Still alive. Again.
I do believe that character is going to be Hooded Justice, one of the original Minutemen, right?
Yeah.
We don't know. He's the only Minuteman.
He's like the original masked vigilante in the comic, right? Like he showed up and then they started, like everybody basically started imitating him, I think.
Did he start the whole thing?
I think so.
Really?
Because I think I remember there's like an article like Hooded Justice is the first.
He was definitely one of the if not the first. Okay. So what a better. I mean, he's got the backstory of a masked vigilante hero.
Absolutely.
He's got and watching that Western, he obviously looked up to the character wearing all black, so he could assume a black mask, things like that. You've got the noose.
He wore a noose around his neck, which is the pretty poignant symbol too. Yeah,
I'm pretty convinced at this point that he's Hooded Justice.
Yeah, I mean...
Nobody's going to contest that.
I know, I buy it. Who else would he be?
Exactly.
So I got a question for you.
Lay it on me.
So I was talking with my girlfriend last night, and she asked me a really good question. If Rorschach were still alive, do you think he would approve of the way the 7th Cavalry is using his image and his journal and the things that they stand for?
I don't... it's a good question. I don't know if we know enough about what the 7th Cavalry stands for to answer that properly. What we know about Rorschach is he did not like the corruption he saw in the world. He
kind of saw everybody as corrupt, though.
Kind of saw everybody as corrupt, which maybe not far from the truth.
Yeah, I don't know. Like he was He was a subscriber to that New Frontiersman, like basically the Alex Jones of his time.
Right.
Which is probably would put his values kind of in line with, what we could imagine the 7th Cavalry being into. I don't remember for sure if he ever really expressed much like racism. He certainly expresses a lot of sexism and like homophobia.
For sure
and a ton of other, issues, to say the least. But, white supremacy, I feel like that doesn't quite fit as well.
Wasn't a psychiatrist black? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember him ever making any
I don't think he
comments.
mentioned it. I don't know.
So I don't see him as a racist, but I agree, sexist for sure, homophobic. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't think he would approve. I especially don't think he'd approve of anybody just trying to take his likeness. I feel like he'd be pretty protective over that.
At the same time, if it turns out that the 7th Cavalry is trying to expose the Adrian Veidt and the whole squid conspiracy thing, like in that case, he would probably be like, well, yeah, they're just working to expose the truth. But I don't know. It was an interesting question.
It might be a form of compromising, and we all know that he's not a fan of compromising.
This is true. But if their goals are aligned, it's not even a compromise, right?
I mean, it would be. I don't know. I don't know enough about the 7th Cavalry.
Mm-hmm, this is true. I mean, that's the big.
But
big
I do know that Rorschach is a stubborn son of a bitch.
This is true.
Good question.
Yeah, definitely a good question. We talked about Sister Night being a nun a little bit, but I feel like there's a lot of meat there, a lot of sort of symbolism.
For sure.
Sister Night has all of her children are adopted. She's we see her literally in
almost
the act
like running
of
an
being
orphanage.
Yeah, we see her in the act of being sexually frustrated, and as we know, nuns aren't known for getting laid.
Sure.
Except in certain documentaries that
we're not going to go there in this podcast.
But yes, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot there to unpack. And classic Damon Lindelof fashion, we've got a lot of religious themes and the conflicts that exist with religion.
Very very cool character though, Sister Night. Mm-hmm. I'm excited to learn more about all of them. I feel like we just really don't know enough about any of these characters. We barely met them. All we really know is the world that we're living in here. We've got the terrorist organization, and big plot coming. So
how about Panda?
My favorite character. What about him?
I don't know. He's just interesting. I wonder if he isn't sort of in on something too.
Yeah.
It feels like everybody kind of has some sort of agenda that we don't know about.
At this point, I really don't trust any of these characters.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like Panda might know something or be in on something with the 7th Cavalry, which is weird because we see that he's a black guy, and if the 7th Cavalry is super racist.
What makes you think that he's associated with the 7th Cavalry?
He has a black and white mask, which I feel like is if it's not sure he could just be like Panda themed superhero and it's a coincidence. But I mean,
sure,
this is a TV show where symbolism and visuals are important. You don't assume that there's coincidence. So, I don't know. I just think there's a lot of similarities, a lot of...
It was interesting where he
effectively prevented the officer from detaining that 7th Cavalry member in the beginning.
Yeah, the fact that his gun didn't get unlocked immediately,
and he tried to stop the cops.
An accident.
Tried to stop the cops from launching their assault on the 7th Cavalry.
He was very against it. He was the only one who was against it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think when you have this show where there's themes of race, a character's race kind of becomes important. So you notice that he's a black guy. Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty significant, especially if we're assuming that the 7th Cavalry are all super racist white supremacists. I think even if they are racist, I feel like it's more complicated than that, Yeah.
I definitely think it's more complicated than the face value. Everything in this show is going to be more complicated.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any other questions?
No. Like I said, I don't really trust any of these characters. Any one of them could be working for the enemy. We don't really even know who the enemy is right now. The 7th Cavalry is the supposed terrorist organization, but we don't really know what their goal is. All we've seen is a video, and they're basically just broad strokes describing a plan, an elaborate plan, right?
Involving watch batteries.
Watch batteries.
I feel like Judd's the bad guy. I feel like this episode was kind of screaming at us that Judd's kind of a bad guy or something.
Yeah.
You know? They're sort
Especially
of like
if they're setting him up to be kind
reversal.
of a parallel to the comedian who had a dark side.
Or maybe in a true like parallel reversal of the comedian, maybe Judd's actually a much better guy than we realize he is. You know, maybe we see him. It's easy to see him as a bureaucratic, fascistic cop right now, but we might find out that his alter ego is actually he's been working against the police to unveil some greater truth this whole time. If he's Dan Dreiberg, then he knows about the squid conspiracy. I don't know. I'm really going to harp on this Dan Dreiberg theory.
I mean, you know, I've kind of talked about it as well. I've thought there's a lot of signs pointing to maybe he is Dan Dreiberg, but I'm kind of convinced at this point that photograph in his closet links the person in the photograph to one of the white supremacists from the beginning of the show.
So you think he's in league with the 7th Cavalry?
It's highly possible. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. All I know is it's summer and we are running out of ice.
One thing to note is the premiere drew 1.5 million viewers, which was the strongest debut performance for a series on HBO's digital platform since Westworld in 2016.
Nice. I love Westworld.
I do too. Big fan. That's really all we've got for this episode. I think we've kind of exhausted the topic.
I'm exhausted.
I am exhausted.
If you're listening to this and you like the way we're doing it and you want us to go as in-depth as we are, or maybe you want us to put the brakes on and go a little less, send us a comment or something. Where can they comment on our...
Follow us on Twitter at HBO Watchmen.
Or our website, theonedrinkin.com.
theonedrinkin.com.
And of course, you can leave us a review on iTunes or Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from.
Until next time, we are one drink in.
And this has been Watching Watchmen.
Watching Watchmen. Tune in next week for another episode.
Awesome. That was a high five, in case you...
Boobastus lives!